Today we are going to talk with Ron Deal. Ron Deal has many hats because he's a blended family author, he's a speaker and therapist.
First of all, let me just say, step families are like any other family, a single parent family or a biological family with mom and dad raising their children. Step families are very similar in many ways, but they are different in other ways. And it's the differences that tend to cause conflict and difficulty, especially in the first few years while the family is bonding or forming a family bond. You see, what happens when, let's just say, a woman who has three children meets a man who has two children, and maybe they were previously widowed or maybe they were previously divorced. But when that man and that woman meet and fall in love, what they often fantasize about is restoring or repairing what they lost. So if she lost her first husband to cancer and he died, it's a tragedy and it's very hard on her and her children. Maybe he lost his first wife to a divorce for whatever reason. It too is very difficult and hard on children through the transition. So when she and he meet and fall in love, they think in some way they're repairing or restoring a whole family for their children and for themselves. And they are creating a family. They're just not repairing the family they lost. They're creating a very different family. So different that we would say that she is not marrying a new dad for her children. Her children only have one dad and he died, but he will only be in the place in their heart of being dad. Now, she's marrying a man who can become a loving father like figure to her children and can have a tremendous influence and can be an amazing person in their life, but he will never be dad. So if he respects that and he steps in as another parent figure, like a grandparent or an uncle or an aunt or somebody who's important to children, if he steps in and acknowledges that from day one and moves slowly into his role, finds his way in, builds a bond and a relationship with the children over time, then over time their family grows together like this. It doesn't start like this. It starts with husband and wife. Everybody else has to figure it out. And it's the figuring it out part that can be challenging. What if the stepfather comes in and he doesn't really understand this dynamic? And so he just kind of comes in and says, I'm the new man of the house and you guys are going to obey me and I'm the new dad. And there's something inside them that goes, I don't think so. Like my dad, I miss my dad. I wish my dad were here. I don't want you here. I wish my dad were here. Now we have a power battle. Now we have conflict. Now we have different expectations that are not being met and disappointment and sadness. And you can see how that begins to erode their ability to come together as a family. It actually pushes them further apart. And that will strain the marriage relationship. So I say all that in order to say this. There's a number of unique dynamics that step families have to try to understand, have to try to address. They have to be very patient with. Parents and step parents need to learn how to work together. Step parents need to learn how to come in slowly and build a bond with the children and not force themselves on the children. There's a lot of moving parts. And the way we like to say it is the more smart you get about your family, the better it goes. And so most of my books have smart in the title. The smart step family, the smart stepdad, the smart stepmom, because we're helping people understand their family so that they can work with it and lead it, not work against it inadvertently, but actually understand it so they can lead their family through this transition. And so there's about 50 different topics that we could talk about that are involved in this merger process: money, finances, holidays, birthdays, special days. What do you do with the sadness and loss in children? How does a parent and a step parent help children continue to grieve what they've lost? Their family to divorce or their family to the death of a parent. How do you work with that? And how does that get in the way of step parents coming into the picture? How does this couple nurture and strengthen their marriage in the midst of all of this crazy sort of merging process? That is a challenge because couples carry the burden of um, they carry the stress, if I could say it that way, that's going on around them. What if there's a co-parent So in our scenario, the man has a former wife, right? And they had two children together. They're co-parents. They're not married anymore, but they're still trying to parent those two children together. What if they hate each other? What if they just abhor each other and the children are constantly put in the middle? What if one of them, what if his former wife is telling her children, look, your stepmother is not your mom. Don't listen to her. Don't like her. You love me, not her. How does that affect the children's connection and bonding with the stepmother? Well, it ruins it. It makes it so much harder. So as you can see, there's a lot of moving parts. And we help people make sense of all of that, understand what's going on and what they can do about
Definitely. And you have been touching some sensible button, if
it.
I can say that, because while you were talking, I was thinking how the child should address the step parent,
Mm,
because sometimes the parent said, okay, he's your new dad. This my thing is the reflex. It's your new dad. So now, should the parent demand that the
mm.
child call the new dad, or how, even
Yeah.
though with the name,
Yeah.
how,
What
how do
terms
we put
should
it
people
together?
use? Yeah,
Mhm.
it's an excellent question. And really, the question gets at a much deeper question, and that is how do we form a bond and become family to one another? So let me just tell you what I mean. First of all, let me just say, every once in a while, I have somebody who walks up to me at a conference or something, and they say, well, I don't want to be the stepmom. I just want to be the mom. I want them to call me mom. And I say, great. What you're telling me is you love them and you want them to feel comfortable and safe with you. That's great. I want them to feel safe with you too. But what if you had somebody walk up to you at work tomorrow and you'd never met this person before? You didn't know anything about them. And they walked up to you and they said, I'm your new best friend. And I want you to tell me your deepest, darkest secrets. What would you do? Well, you probably wouldn't say, okay, you're my new best friend. Like, you'd be like, no, you're not. Like, until you are, you aren't. Likewise, you cannot demand that a child calls you mom. That's a special term. It's a term of endearment. It holds a special place in a child's heart. You can't make them love you. Now, you want them to love you. That's good, but you can't make them love you. So the better way to do this is to have a conversation with the child and together, what I call co-create the terms you're going to use and let those terms reflect the relationship that you have today. The, the relationship will change tomorrow and the next day and the next day, and the terms might change too, but let it reflect the relationship you had today. Co-creating is so important. So it sounds like this. Stepmother goes to her stepchildren and says, look, I want you to know that your mom is your mom and I will never replace her. I will never try to be your mom. I will never get in the way of your relationship with your mom. Now, having said that, you and I have to figure out how we're going to talk to each other and what we're going to call each other. And when you introduce me to your friends at school or your teacher at school, you have to call me something. So we kind of need to figure this out. What would you like to call me? And I just want you to know that I'm okay with you calling me anything that you're comfortable with, as long as it's respectful. you know you can't call me the old witch. No, that's not right. But you could call me by my first name, or you could call me whatever that is. What do you think? What do your friends at school call their step parents? And you have a conversation and you let the child speak. Children in blended families have had a lot of things taken away from them and they had no voice in it. Their parent died, their parents divorced, they had to move houses. They had to move away from a school they loved and friends that they loved, and they had to move to a different church, and they had to move to a different community because the finances changed. They have had 1,000 things change without their choice. So give them the choice whenever you can. And so it may sound like a child saying, well, I want to call you Miss Lighty or Mama Deuce or Bonus Mom, or I don't know, how you say in French? What's two in French?
Two, deux, deux,
Do? All
deux.
right. Mama do. All right, there you go. So it's like be creative and come up with something that the child is comfortable with and you're comfortable with. And you go, yeah, okay, I can go. Let's go with that. And by the way, when I introduce you to other people, I'd like to say this is my daughter. But I also know that that may make you feel uncomfortable because that's sort of weird and like maybe you don't feel that yet. And so I respect that. What would you want me to call you when I'm introducing you to my friends? And you let the child speak. And together you co-create something you both can live with. Here's the point. At the end of the day, you've found agreement. And ironically, you've also begun put to give definition to your relationship. Think about that. You had no definition before you had this conversation. Now you have definition. It's so important. And then you just walk that out over time. Now, here's the thing. In 6 months, it might change. In 2 years, it might change. In 5 years, it might change. I talked with a lady one time that she attended one of my step family conferences. It's been now 21 years ago. And I bumped into her 17 years later. And each little phase along the road, their terms for one another changed until the day came where one of her stepdaughters said to her, "Would it be okay if I called you mom?" That took 17 years. But you see, that child had finally become okay with this and finally found peace with that, that it made sense to call her mom. You cannot demand love. Don't try, it will backfire on you. But if you're patient, if you work with the child, you will find you can find something for today, and over time it will deepen and change as your relationship grows.